When should we celebrate progress? Only at the finish line or all along the way? Welcome to the Life of Try, where we explore what it means to keep showing up even when growth doesn't look like a straight line. I'm Wynne Leon, and in this episode, I'm thinking about something that I don't do very naturally, celebrating the small wins. When do we pause and recognize progress? After the first brave step? After a setback? Or only when the whole thing is finished? From a project decluttering my house for an Airbnb experience, to lessons from Fogg, Toyota's Kaizen culture, and even Captain Sully's checklist mindset. This episode is about why the little victories matter more than we think. When my daughter was in 3rd grade, her teacher had a great visual to share with parents on the open house night. It was a chart about success. It showed what we think it should be, or want it to be, a straight line going up. The second slide was what it actually is, a windy 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of continuum. Her point was to encourage us to keep the bigger picture in mind, and also to reassure us that even when it doesn't look like it's easy or winning or even progress, it's still growth. That always leaves me a little flummoxed when it comes to the things that I try, because I'm not sure when to celebrate the effort. When I was reading Mike Rucker's book, The Fun Habit, I was inspired with a creative idea of how to fund our summer adventures. My kids and I could rent out our house as an Airbnb when the World Cup comes to Seattle this summer. I have been entertaining that idea in the back of my mind, but I always stopped when I thought of the effort necessary to declutter the house to make it ready for guests. But Mike's book reminded me that I could make it a game for me and my kids. We'd have fun doing the hard work, and then it would make the travel that we do with our earned funds even more rewarding, a win all around. So I posed the idea to my kids, and they were all in. Then I started decluttering and rearranging in order to make our house look like it's not just a kid's playground. The living room was my first effort. It took a couple of hours of work to take down the hammock I installed during COVID, move the beanbag chair upstairs, and bring down the leather chairs. I washed the windows, I put some Lego flowers on the mantle, and voila, it looked ready to take pictures for the listing. I was delighted. But that was just the first room. I had the kitchen, all the bedrooms, the front and backyards to go. So when do you celebrate an effort like that? After the first room, when it's listed, the first booking, or when we go on our trip? And just like the 3rd grade teacher said, it was not all forward momentum toward success. There was a snag after I started uploading the pictures and I couldn't figure out how to arrange them into rooms. And then I needed a license from the city of Seattle. And after paying for that, I found out that I needed to file some other paperwork, and that would hold me up for 3 days. I tend not to celebrate the short-term wins, but just to keep my head down and working straight ahead. And I think I come by that honestly. I remember saying something to my mom on my daughter's first birthday that I thought she was a delightful child. And my mom said to me, "You aren't done yet." Right. But should we celebrate milestones along the way, or just when they're out of the house and independent? So I needed some guidance about when to celebrate. And I started looking for examples and stories of where and how people celebrate wins along the way. And I came away with 3 really good examples. First, celebrating tiny steps as a way to reinforce the behavior, from Stanford professor B.J. Fogg. Second, impact of small successes over the long term, as exemplified by Toyota and their Kaizen culture. And third, as an example from journalist Dan Harris, Professor Ranjay Gulati, and Captain Sully Sullenberger, of using checklists to stay on track. So digging into the first example. One thing that really stayed with me comes from B.J. Fogg and his tiny habits work. BJ runs the Behavior Design Lab at Stanford, and he specializes in research and teaching about human behavior. His idea is wonderfully simple. If you want a behavior to stick, don't wait for some huge milestone to celebrate. Celebrate the tiny successes right away. In his view, that quick burst of positive emotion is what helps the habit take root. He even connects those little celebrations to identity, almost like saying, "Look at me. I'm becoming the kind of person I want to be." That feels so different from rewarding yourself only at the finish line. It says the win is in showing up, in noticing that you actually did the thing, however small it was. So my second example came from Toyota's Kaizen culture, which is built around the idea of making small improvements every day. What strikes me here is that the improvement doesn't have to be dramatic to matter. It might be shaving a few seconds off of a process, noticing a problem sooner, or making one little task a smoother for the next person. Toyota averages 5,000 improvement suggestions per employee every year. In that culture, those tiny adjustments aren't dismissed as trivial. They're respected. They're part of how the whole system gets better. And there's something really freeing in that. It reminds us that progress doesn't have to look like a breakthrough. Sometimes it looks like a person paying attention, learning something, and making one small thing better than it was yesterday. And then there's the third idea of the checklist. I was reminded of the power of this from a recent newsletter from journalist Dan Harris. He talks about what he learned from Harvard Business School professor Ron J. Gulati. They provided the example of Captain Sullenberger, the pilot that landed his plane in the Hudson River after it ran into a flock of geese. The checklist he and his co-pilot followed provided a picture of small steps of courage. What I find powerful about that story is that the victory isn't in the disappearance of fear. The victory is staying functional in the middle of it. It's using a checklist, trusting the next step, and doing the next right thing when everything in front of you makes you want to freeze. That reframes courage for me. It doesn't have to be dramatic or fearless. Sometimes courage is simply regaining your footing one step at a time. Sometimes the short-term win is not that everything feels okay again. It's that you keep going anyway. And that's something to celebrate. So when should we celebrate? These powerful examples remind me that it's every step of the way. Small things matter. Or as I learned from podcast guest Sharon Eubank, the Director of Global Humanitarian Services for the LDS Church, do small things with great love. It really makes a difference. So I'm going to wrap up this episode with a status on my Airbnb effort. I got it listed. We have 2 bookings. My kids have learned how to pressure wash and also wash the exterior windows. There's a lot to do before we leave, but I'm trying to celebrate each step along the way. It's helping to keep them and me fresh as I remember that trying isn't a straight line. It curves this way and that, and it all leads somewhere. So here's to trying and celebrating the try. Thank you for listening. Our music was written for us by the incredible duo of Jack Campora and Rob Koenig. For show notes and more great inspiration, see avitiva.com, avitiva.com.